Morris, I'm
Yeah.
just recognizing you. Good to see you, man. Good to have you here.
And this is focused on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmer, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pocondre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Yeah, focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah, 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 yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focused on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey. In diaspora. Current affairs. Reliable information. History. Talking about culture. Politics. Education. Entertainment. Business. Sports. Advertisement, articulation, focus on Liberia, focus on Liberia, focus on Liberia, from Monday to Sunday, focus.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Focus on Liberia. Today's Thursday, so it's Tough Talking Thursday. We're going to talk tough here. My name is Dennis Jard, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. Today, we're also broadcasting live on Kia Radio 95.9. We have our man, George Goa, in studio. George, welcome to the show.
It's good to be here this evening with you guys on a wet Thursday evening in Central Monrovia.
Thank you. Let me welcome all of you. Our topic today is about memorialization, to memorialize. Of 2 decades after the Liberian Civil War, how are we doing with memorialization? How do we remember the people that passed away, and how are we doing with that? And what does it mean? Quite recently, the government of Liberia announced the reburial of 2 of our former presidents. So when that happened, we said, well, what's, this thing, the people been talking a long time about memorialization. How are we doing? Oh, that only BB people they can remember and not the small. Oh, that one we're going to talk today. Let me welcome our guest, the person who have been talking about this thing for many, many years. I've had him on this show a couple of times. I interview him or somebody else. He's an expert when it comes to transitional justice. And the main thing that he really pay attention to when he was in school is memorialization. Dr. Aaron Weah, he studied in the UK. Those days, before even the coming of the settler, crew people were going to the UK to study. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dennis, and thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. Quite recently, you got a big job with the Duke. When Dr. Ibrahim Yan left, all the young doctors, and we want to welcome our people in Liberia. So the thing we're going to talk about today is, how do we, when people, especially after the Liberian Civil War, plenty of people die. There are some massacre on mass graves and all this kind of thing. And part of the way we can remember people, because our death, especially in Liberia, is not easy. We want to remember, in such a way that the bad thing that happened, it never happened again. But it looks like we're having some hard time with it. That's what we want to talk about today. Let me also welcome FOL political analyst J. Victor Nabe. Victor, welcome to the show.
Hey, Dennis, good to be here. Dr. Weah, it's nice to of you to join us. I believe this is our first meeting. Welcome to the set. Welcome again, my dear colleagues, Dr. Williams,
Thank
rather,
you.
Mr. Promai, and of course, Mr. Eastman. Let me also welcome our audience. Thanks for joining us. Hope the weather is treating you nicely. On the East Coast, here it's pretty hot, but it's good to be here. Please share the show. Invite a friend.
Thank you. Thank you. And Dr. Weah is no stranger to many of my panelists here. Let me welcome Dr. George Williams. Welcome, Georgie.
Thank you, Dennis, so much. Thanks to everyone that's here. I'm honored to again be in the presence of Mr. Weah, who, if there be any authority on memorialization and transitional justice in Liberia, we can definitely point in his direction. His works over the last 5-10 years have been pivotal in this area, and so it's an honor to join him on this set to discuss the Liberian situation. So it's great to be here. Thanks, Dennis.
Thank you. Let me also welcome Mr. P. Murray Pamoli Kroma. His colleagues call him the perfect manager. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you. It's always good to be on. I know it's been a while, but just I had to hop on today because I know Aaron was going to be on, and so I kind of felt an obligation to participate in the show. So I'm still at work, but yeah, it's good. It's good to be on with all these great sons of the soil.
Thank you. I was not even going to talk that one that you brought it out, so let's leave it. Let me also welcome our man from the nation's capital, Jimmy Eastman. Welcome, Jimmy.
Dennis, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure being here, especially with such distinguished gentlemen. Dr. Weah, we welcome you and we'll look forward to a good conversation here about this. Hope you can educate us on this because we don't know what the guidelines are on such a matter. So this is good. This is good for all Liberians.
And that's Jimmy.
Thank you.
That's Jimmy Eastman, whose name is synonymous to diplomacy when it comes to Liberia.
Yeah. Okay.
Dr. Weah, I want to say, feel at home. Just as an opening, your work. I want to talk a little bit about your work so that our audience can have an idea who we're talking about here and the thing that really brought the devil outside today. And I'm talking about physical. So you see people are excited to hear from you, especially on this particular fighting for common ground, or you've done it all. So just tell us a little bit for those of our colleagues or listeners who don't know that just tell us a little bit about the work that you have done in this area when it comes to transitional justice, when it comes to memorialization and peace building in our country, Liberia.
Okay. Well, Dennis, thanks again for having me. And I know quite a few of the panelists here. Maurice Kroma and I have gone back and forth. Work on that. George and I go back many years when I worked for the Dr. Sawyer Center for Democratic Empowerment. Then a young university student. I've just left university. The two other panelists, it's good to meet you, and hopefully this wouldn't be our last. We'll get to know and engage much more. In terms of the work I've done over the years, I would say right from university, I was among that's about 20 or so years ago. I was part of the civil society advocacy that campaigned for the passage of the TRC Act. So I got my undergraduate degree and overlap with the peace agreement at the time. So right from university, I just got started into transitional justice advocacy, and then I moved on to work for international organization then that provided technical support to the TRC. So you will see my work in this area span at least 20 years or more. And in terms of work that I've done specifically, I have stayed engaged with grassroots communities that have been preoccupied with trying to remember political violence in Liberia. mostly from the Civil War, some going back to the decade of the 80s, and so others to pre 1980s. So my work has spanned specifically the temporality that the TRC used, April 1979 to 1980. So I've engaged with communities trying to. I've supported community trying to understand best practices in Africa, best practices in other parts of the world, how to go about remembering or how to go about building memorials that commemorate the memory of loved ones. I've also written and published in academic journals, Oxford University journals, and a few other journals. The work there was basically to draw attention to the experiences of Liberia coming out of conflict, and of course the TRC own experience, what I refer to as Liberia experiment with transitional justice in the work of the TRC. What is the outcome of that? How are we reeling from the TRC own experience? How has it changed society for the better or for the worse? These are things that we continue to try to understand a lot more. So this is just uh, sort of a summary introduction, but if you should also know, I had a brief few years in government as a policy analyst, where I worked directly with Dr. Sawyer, the Governors Commission between 2012 to 2014. I worked, and then I also worked as the head of a American NGO in Liberia called Search for Common Ground. Much of that work involved with peace building, supporting community, again working in grassroots community, dealing with peace building work in different shapes and forms. So that's a brief summary in terms of my work history, academic outputs, and work I continue to do. And of course, as Dennis mentioned, I recently replaced Dr. Ibrahim Ye. He's the deputy foreign minister. We have the Duka Institute for Social and Economic Research. The Duka Institute, if you all should know, is I wouldn't say the first think tank, but it's an academic think tank established a few years ago by Liberian PhDs returning from America and Europe, and to have an outfit that looks very closely at academic research and policy changes in Liberia. So at the moment, I serve as the director. I'm working with a small research team. Some of our folks are in the US, others are in Liberia, and collaboratively, we're regional, trying to do regional research. And we recently signed a partnership agreement with the Governors Commission. As you know, the Governors Commission is the independent think tank of government that is pushing for policy reforms at all levels of government. So we think that it is a very good partnership where we are on the one hand dealing directly with primary research and going to the governors and say, hey, this is what we found and these are the changes that we think are relevant. And we're partnering, holding policy dialogues to bring about change. So in a nutshell, this is what I've done, and this is what I'm currently doing. So happy to talk more about that.
Thank you very much. You know, when you look at, and I'm not one of those who like to talk about ages, but when you look at what he has done, then you say, but you know, he's such a young man and his work spans so much. And then when you think about working with Dr. Sawyer, it's almost like, you know, in the Bible, those who walk with Paul, those who walk with, you know, so people like that, they have special grace in our community because Dr. Sawyer, I mean, that's an idol for many of us. But let's get into it, Dr. I know we've discussed this before, but just to set the basis, memorialization. And the reason this topic came back up that we are talking about it today is quite recently, the government announced that our two presidents, past President Dr. William Arotabo and Dr. Samuel K. Doe, needed to be reburied. So I gave him a call. I said, hey, we talked about this long time. Maybe government is trying to do something about it now. So let's set the basis by talking about what is memorialization and how does that, what is the impact, especially coming from the Liberian Civil War. It's been what, 20 years now? So let's do some definition
22.
here. What is it? Yeah, 22 years. Oh, wow. That
Well,
makes me look good because
yeah. So memorialization is the process Yeah, memorialization is the process through which society, whether from armed conflict,
Go ahead, sir.
so memorialization is a process whereby society coming from armed conflict, civil war, authoritarianism, or genocide try to engage in a collective process of remembering. Sometimes that process is led by the state, other in other cases is led by community at the grassroots level. But most of that process is shaped through sometimes a truth commission. The experience we had in Liberia and the TRC process. There's a section of the TRC report that is very prescriptive in terms of how the society should go about remembering. The TRC recommended at different levels. One, on the sense we're talking about the presidents that President Talbot and President Doe that they be symbolically reburied. I mean, the framing of that recommendation is essentially around how pre-1980s remembered and how post-1980s remember. The spirit of that is reconciliation. The two presidents represent uh, the tension between intergroup relations in Liberia. On the one hand, the so-called indigenous persons that President Doe tend to symbolize, and on the other hand, you have President Talbot, who symbolizes pre-1980s Liberian society, and the whole idea of trying to engage into a symbolic reburial by these two presidents was in effect trying to bring the society together in an attempt that will facilitate some level of closure by having President Doe reburied. I mean, looking at the violent overthrow of Doe and the barbaric torture and execution of President Doe, that there will be some level of closure in his ethnic community, in the same way that there will be some closure in the broader Liberian society. And in the same case with President Talbot, who was also violently executed in 1980, and that symbolic reburial will start a long process of healing of the society. One of some of the objective of memorialization is a form of truth telling. Society want to engage with the truth. That's why memorialization that follows a period of investigation uh, it is considered much more grounded in truth than one that is just symbolic, that just symbolically comes from nowhere and 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 go forward. The second part of memorialization is a form of justice. It's a form of justice that this happened and we are carrying on this form of remembering as a form of justice, as a form of trying to remember, as a form of acknowledgement as well, acknowledging that this happened, and by doing this, we're trying to remember yesterday so that today we can learn from yesterday through today. So, truth telling, acknowledgement, and representation. When you finally put together all this memorialization, what messages, what images are you trying to communicate? If it's a memorial, if it's what are the different representations you have in there? They are just as important as the process is. If you go, for example, go to the museum today, the Liberian Museum, you see that the museum is so very thin. You don't have a thick, museum like you would have in the apartheid museum in South Africa. I mean, I went to the apartheid museum, and as strong as I think I was, I left from there shaken. You know, I was really, because it was really put together. I mean, trying to bring out all the right emotions in you, trying to challenge your own sense of your own emotional stability. The process of some of these museums or form of memorialization is to really transport you to the place of violence, so that you come from there shaken with all of the right reasons. So memorialization is a whole process that is also very cathartic, that try to take society back. Like Liberia is 34 years, 35 years since the first a gunshot went in the air and the destructions of the society started. So the memorialization of former president is really to reconnect now that we have a generation, about 70% of the Liberian society are those 30 years or 35 years and below. So we have majority of Liberians alive today never lived through that experience. If some of them lived through it, they were too young to have an opinion about what really was about. So that's why memorialization is so important to help the younger generation come to terms with what this destructive period was in the Liberian society, a period that have changed the society so drastically that you cannot even you have no knowledge of what in the 80s were or pre 1980 was. So it is an interesting period. It is an interesting process of remembering. Sometimes it can be destabilizing, not in terms of violence, but just in terms of the collective thought of society, in the way that people want to remember, destabilizing in the way that it challenges the mindset or it challenges ideas of reconciliation. That sometimes remembering is not aligned to reconciliation. It's there to challenge all of that. We can go much more into that in terms of
Yeah,
how does memorialization challenge reconciliation. Yeah.
definitely. And I want to bring in the rest of my colleagues, but let me ask you, and then I can pass the mic on. Is setting the stage again? What is the general state? How are we doing with memorialization? Because even when it was announced about the reburial of the former presidents, it really, and I'm not saying that they should announce, but it's like this was one out of the blue. What is the state of memorialization today in Liberia 10 years or 22 years after the Civil War? Are we doing something? Or is to me, it didn't connect to the overall TRC recommendation. It was like just one off, right? So what is the current state of memorialization in Liberia?
Well, if I mean the current state of memorialization in Liberia, I would say there there seems to be some growing interest by the Liberian state, by the Liberian society, to be a little more deliberate about how to remember. Now, what do I mean by this? With Joseph Boyka administration, uh, uh, Dennis, are you there? Are you still there with me?
Yes, is it me or everybody else?
For a second, we couldn't hear
I
you.
don't.
Yeah, we couldn't hear you for a
All right,
second.
all right. So hopefully,
You started with
yeah,
the
all right. It
current
may
state.
have been from our end. So yeah, so the current state of memorialization, we should appreciate where we are by first understanding the last 6 years and earlier. So we are at a place where we are moving towards a period, what I would say, a strong political will to really deal with the past. Uh, Prior to Workers' administration, we were in a place where it was mostly characterized by what I would term as the politics of silence. There was the notion of collective amnesia that Liberians should forgive and forget and just move on without really dealing with this. And much of that was informed by the controversy of the TRC final report. The society has been divided on whether to proceed with the TRC report as recommended or whether to just wipe it away. So we've seen the last 12 years, the last 18 years after the war, where the TRC report has been placed on trial, where the regime of George Weah was a little more selective or non-committal at all with that. But with Worker and the inauguration of January last year, we've seen very strong words of endorsement. We hear strong words of acknowledgement trying to move forward. So if you ask me, what is the state of memorialization? I would say we are at a place where we're seeing some deliberate efforts of trying to remember. But even with that, there is still some selective practice of how we should go about. We're not seeing an inclusive strategy of how we should engage with the practice of memorialization. We're seeing an elite form of memorialization that has been prioritized over a more grassroots based memorialization. So if you ask me about the state of memorialization, I would tell you that there is a form of elite prioritization of how memorialization ought to proceed, whereas the TRC report was much more deliberate at all levels, that there should be memorials built and erected in each at every site of massacre. And the TRC report have has put together about 226 sites of massacres. I mean, we can go into why that number is so high. And but what we've seen from the onset of Joseph Boakai administration is the political will to uh, look more at the elites, the reburial of the elites, former presidents, and former ministers and statesmen of the Liberian society. It's not a bad thing. I think some our former officials who die in some of the most unspeakable way deserves a proper reburial. But then we shouldn't stop there. There should be a strategy that sends a clear message across the society that every death matter. Everyone deserves to go to a gravesite on Decoration Day to remember their loved ones who died. The TRC report says about 30% of those killed during the Civil War had no graves. So it should tell you that on Decoration Day, many people sit home and relive the trauma of 34 years ago, 35 years ago, 10, 15 years when the second Civil War came about. So there is still so much healing that needs to take place. And every time Decoration Day comes, is a grim reminder for many Liberians, some in the diaspora, some at home, of those who live with the knowledge that their loved ones were killed in some of the most uh, brutal way, but they never had a chance to bury them. They don't know where they were buried, and it is the responsibility of the government to set in place a motion, to set in place a strategy that respond to the collective of a collective form of grief, a collective form of mourning, and of course a collective form of memorialization, where every Liberian, regardless of status, regardless of class and ethnicity, that you get to be buried and remembered in a way that is befitting for every civilized society. Let me stop there and hear from our other
Thank you.
colleagues.
Thank you. And let's go clockwise. Victor, Jimmy, Morris, and Georgie.
Okay.
All right, so it's good to be here, and Dr. Weah, thank you very much for that really comprehensive background. I think you're right on most of the points. Memorialization, I think it's a recognition of a life lived, especially in the case of our former presidents. Is an acknowledgement of their contribution to the development of Liberia. We may disagree with some of their policies, but indeed they did also do some good things. And so I think memorializing them is as an acknowledgement of what they did, what they contributed to the country, especially the two of them. I think it helps to bring closure to their family as well. I think it's kind of cathartic for the family, seeing that their forebears have finally been recognized for the contributions that they made to the development of Liberia. As to the rest of the country, I absolutely agree. I think this president should have, I hope he's thinking about it. I should have also acknowledged some of the common people who are not the statesperson. What about, the likes of Wogabi Tapia, the likes of Voodoo Child? There are lots of other common people who perished pursuing, a better Liberia. So I hope some kind of gesture will come from the president as well to acknowledge these people. They did make their own contributions as well to Liberia in whichever way they could. It may not have been in a grand way like the president did. But I think it's a good call to memorialize these people. I think it helps. When you think about people like Genghis Khan and all of that, then you really get to appreciate the fact that we are acknowledging that these people, they serve our country. They made some contribution, and I think it's right for us to acknowledge their contributions.
Yeah, it looks like we lost our guest for a moment here. He's off the stage. I think his camera is off.
It's the camera, but it's on.
Okay.
I'm still here. I'm still here.
Okay. So very good. Thank you, Dr. Ura, for your work in this area. It has been noted that acknowledgement of suffering and truth helps people deal with the pain, trauma, and loss they experienced during these civil wars and various mass killing. But I think we have one example. We wanted to dig. There were mass grave at Center Street for 1979 rice riots, as it's popularly called. It wasn't a rice riot, but anyway, many people were buried in a mass grave, and there's been some movement to memorialize them, all those that lost their lives in 1979. But we haven't seen enough movement toward that. The other day, I think President Weah built a park over at PHP there, memorializing the 13 shot on the pole. And we've seen a little movement in this direction. But my question is, for healing and reconciliation to be complete, doesn't there have to be doesn't it have to be complemented by justice and accountability, before it really takes root? Because that is one thing the Truth and Reconciliation was supposed to be doing, is have people accountable for what they did. But that hasn't moved any. What's your opinion on having accountability before you do the memorialization, or at least along with memorialization?
I think he's setting up, but I'll venture to say I think Jimmy, it makes.
Okay.
I was gonna say, it makes of restorative, which I think we're getting to discover, and a little bit of retributive justice. I think it makes of the two. I agree with, but I don't think the memorialization can be so necessary as exclusive. I think we can do all two together. While we're pursuing justice, I think we can also memorialize these people. I think I think whatever the justice will reveal, I think it should not obviate the fact that these people made some contribution. They lived with our leaders, so I think we need to acknowledge that. And I think that's why whatever it was that they did, as we're trying to sort it out, I think memorializing them really doesn't necessarily have to wait.
Dr. Weah, I think you heard Jimmy's question.
Yeah. So, Jimmy's question is about sequencing and what comes first, and there should be some bit of criminal accountability before we move to memorialization. That has been the question in transitional justice community about the impact of transitional justice measure around the world has shown that the combination of measures that you have, like memorialization, is being determined as the fifth pillar of transitional justice. You have reparations, you have criminal accountability, you have amnesty, you have other measures there, like institutional reform. Each measure serves a particular purpose. So, for example, some other people may not be interested in criminal accountability. They don't care whether you get prosecuted and sent to prison or not. They want to engage with memorialization, and memorialization can go to the point of history writing. And an important tenet in memorialization is that for contradictory narrative to coexist with each other, that I see this, I don't like it. It challenges my own truth, but this is the truth of another group, and so they both stand together. You see there in these two different conflicting narrative, there is no future reconciliation, because the two texts, the two truths, are just, as we say, diametrically opposed to each other. So, and much of that is existential. It challenges the other person's identity in the same way that it challenges the other person's own identity. So you see, memorialization is quite a very interesting area that is very rife with a lot of ongoing tension. Let's use the Lutheran Church on 14th Street for a minute. If you enter the Lutheran Church, I don't know how many of you have entered the Lutheran Church, but in that Lutheran Church, 600 persons, as you know, were killed there on the 29th and 30th of 1990 in July. And by 1999, Yasa Zoe, the wife of Taylor's and Charles Taylor's mother, along with her daughter-in-law, went at the Lutheran Church and were able to erect a memorial to the memory of Philip Nelson Taylor, Charles Taylor's father, who was killed in the Lutheran Church that year. Every year, victims, predominantly girls and minors, go at the Lutheran Church for a memorial service, and they are very angry, often very angry about why was Charles Taylor's father the only victim whose memory was singled out, and there is a decent plaque erected to his honor, and you have the 599 plus victims buried beneath a basketball court. There is very little honor given to them. And in an interview with some of these victims, they've told me that what that plaque of Charles Taylor, father Philip Nelson Taylor, symbolizes is that it's sending a message. The family is sending a message that he was apparently the most important man killed that night, and every other person was not as important as he is. So this is an evidence of how contradictory, how conflict prone memorialization can be, and how if the state is leading, and this was not done by the state, this was just a family project in collaboration with a church engaging with this, but you see the level of hurt that is coming out with victims expressing their disappointment and the rest of it. So this is a picture of how memorialization can be. Even at the grassroots level, there can be tension.
Yes, there can be tension. Ladies and gentlemen, if you just joining us, this is Focus on Liberia, and we are discussing memorialization in the wake of the announcement for the reburial of President Samuel Doe and President William Turbot. Our guest is Dr. Aaron Weah. He eats, sleeps, and drinks transitional justice. Before Aaron comes in, Maurice, maybe you want to just, not a question, but if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, Dennis, so some of the things that were playing in my head, Aaron and I have done some work.
I could see that.
Yeah, some of the things that we've done in the past, he sort of reminded or sort of reminiscence of some of that effort, and the way he addresses some of these things just remind me that there are key questions that are just coming to my mind. But essentially, what my understanding of memorialization is an opportunity for the state and the people to sort of reorganize the society. Because for conflict to happen, there must have been some sort of disagreement that ended up into violence, that ended up into the breakdown of law and order within the state. And so an opportunity when those things happen, when violence come to an end and the guns get silent, there's an opportunity for key members of the society to come together and sit together and say, okay, we cannot go back to what just happened. We need to fix it. For us to fix it is for us to acknowledge the existence of our diversity, but at the same time, sort of remember all of those who were victims of our own unfortunate situation. These unfortunate situations led to the death of thousands and thousands of people. So when I hear Aaron talk about, how one elite family go to the Lutheran Church and recognize their family member for, being a victim of the Civil War. However, there are 500 plus people that are also buried in the same vicinity. Yeah, the government did not memorialize that person, but the government also did not make any effort to recognize that there were so many other people who died at that particular vicinity, and they needed to be recognized in some sort of way. Even if it's just a memorial wall that had the names of all of those who passed, it would have been some sort of way that people can go back and always remember that. So stuff like that. But I wanted to just ask Aaron, some key questions about, in terms of...
So before your question comes, let him land on his first thought, and then you come in and ask the question.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Aaron.
Aaron, you got interrupted.
You want me to continue, Dennis, from
Yeah.
yeah, you want me to continue from where I left off?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I've studied. I've worked with the Lutheran Church. I've worked with the victim communities there, and they have. It's a form of re-victimization that we're dealing with here. These are people. These are victims who survived the massacre, and there's a part of them where I feel that the church has co-opted the entire memory making process, because on the one hand, the Lutheran Communion felt when the church was attacked in 1990, they felt that the Lutheran edifice was attacked, the Lutheran Communion was attacked, but the victims there who are from different counties also feel a personal sense of loss. They don't belong to the Lutheran Communion. They are people who went there seeking refuge. So you see the layers of complication here. The church, on the one hand, feel a sense of ownership that this happened in our church. We have the prerogative to lead the process here. On the other hand, the victims there feel that they're just being treated as token gesture. Every year on the 29th, on the 30th of July, when they go for the commemoration, the church play a most central role and leave these victims on the margins of the planning and the planning process. They are not given any major role. So recently, in an interview I had with members of this community, they have been thinking about exhumation. How can we exhume our loved ones from here, taken to a neutral site? So you see, even at the grassroots level, at the without the state intervention, memorialization is a deeply political process. They fight for recognition, they fight for representation, they fight for acknowledgement. Is at the center of how people want to remember their loved ones, and sometimes is in conflict with a more dominant organizing authority, as we see with the Lutheran Church is playing such an important role in the process. Yeah.
Thank you.
Will you call this the elite
Hold on.
memorization you were talking about? Because it's only.
Hold on, Jimmy, hold on, because we have many. I wanted to go around, right? Maybe Morris will ask the same question. So just hold on. Sorry, Morris, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, Aaron. I mean, I sort of connect with most of what you just said, Aaron. I've read a little bit about some of the things that we're talking about today, because I have a graduate degree in conflict resolution. So most of my classes were centered around retributive justice and stuff like that. Now, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, South Africa,
Okay.
those three countries all had some sort of reconciliation commission to promote truth telling, so that people will not go back to the past. But what I noticed with Sierra Leone, Rwanda, and South Africa is that each of those situations, there is some sort of recognition of what happened in the past. For example, in South Africa, there is a annual genocide commemoration day or week. They have a whole museum that people go and see what happened in the past. Rwanda pretty much have like a museum also that people can go and look at and see what happened to them in the past. In our case in Liberia, it seems most of what we've done has been surface level interventions. We've not gone down to grassroots victimization. So, for example, in Lofa County, there's a mass grave of people that were killed. In Bapolu County, not Bapolu, in Bon County, I believe is I forgot the town, a small town. There's also some sort of mass grave there. In Nima County, there's some other mass graves that are there. How do we deal with grassroots memorialization such that the communities that were victimized as a result of these unfortunate situation recognize themselves as being part of the state, and the state recognize their existence, at the same time have their diversity. So I don't want to go into the whole ethnicity thing, but there's some sort of diversity in how people see themselves as victim of the Civil War. How do we reconcile all of these complex situations?
Mm-hmm. Aaron?
Mr. Weah, Dr. Weah.
There might be a delay, something maybe.
Aaron, are you hearing us?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. You heard Morris's
Are
question?
you hearing me, Dennis?
Yes, I'm hearing you. Are you hearing us?
Yes. Yes. Are you hearing me? I think my internet is a little spotty, so I keep going on and off.
Yeah, we're
Yeah.
hearing
Are
you.
you? Are you? Are you? I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. Are you hearing me?
Yes. Did you hear Morris's question?
Yeah. I follow it for the most part.
There he goes.
We're losing him again.
A little Miami. We just gotta bear with a little Miami. We just gotta bear.
And let me welcome Dr. Clarence Pearson. Welcome, Doc.
Thank you, Dennis, for having me, and hi to my fellow panelists. It's a pleasure being on the show today. And hi to the Liberian people.
Right. And I think two questions here that there are complexities surrounding memorialization, and how can Morris asking how can the different, he calls that grassroots memorialization, I think, and then Aaron, you can hear us now clearly.
I'm hearing you loud and clear. Yes.
All right. Morris will come again because he's talking about grassroots memorization or maybe collective memory, as you will call it. But Morris, go please just rephrase, repeat.
So it's not entirely collective memory. I really want to see memorialization at communities level where there are victims of the war that are at the community level. It's not the higher level, President Doe, President Tolbert. Is people that are living in these small towns and villages where there are mass murder that happened, and those people were buried in those little towns. How do they memorialize their relatives and friends and still consider the diversity within their living arrangement, or sort of see themselves as one?
What do you mean by considering the collective? And let's be clear, right? What do you mean by the diversity, ethnicity, and memory?
So I will give you an example when I talk about it. For example, in Lofa County, there was a mass murder that happened. Aaron knows about some of what I'm talking about in Lofa. In Bon County, there's also another mass grave that still exists in that place. That people of different ethnicity and different religious group that were buried in one grave. How do they consider the diversity at the same time, live in that community and memorialize each other? Because
thank you.
Different people bury different ways, people memorialize different ways, just the diversity of it.
Thank you. Dr. Weah.
Yeah, so I think, Morris, your question about grassroots memorialization is always important. Oftentimes we overemphasize the complexity of state-led memorialization, and that grassroots memorialization is simpler, is much easier, but that isn't true. In fact, the study of grassroots organizing seems to suggest that grassroots community are multi-layered. You have complexity, you have the diversity of ethnic groups, a different culture, different way of life, and how you reconcile these way of life in trying to address the past has proven to be, or is proven to be, equally as much complicated as the state trying to. But the simpler way to deal with that is basically to every memorial should have an objective. Some of the objective of memorialization is based on the shared experience here. Perhaps we should design a memorial for the purpose of mourning. Others will design a memorial for the purpose of learning. Others will design a memorial for the purpose of reflection. So it deals with specific objectives, just to streamline and have the expectations of a diverse community met, and not trying to do too much. So let me give you an example. When I travel around Liberia for my data collection, I wanted to understand how across ethnic communities, across religious community, Liberians were engaged with the past. I had a long interview with the chief imam of Liberia, and he tried to explain to me how in Muslim community the form of remembering is different. Even the Islamic form of burial is different. There's a prescription to how, if you die, the whole theology about the afterlife in Islamic beliefs is different, and so there is less the emphasis of how someone is buried and the afterlife is sort of de-emphasized compared to how Christianity see it. And then there's the issue of prayer, the Al-Fatiha that Islamic faithful recite. I've seen that at some of the sites of massacres. They don't engage.
Oh,
Dennis, maybe we need to get this man on Starlink next time. FOL get name. Yeah, he's talking some real interesting things, man. It's bad to see him go off.
That's the reality. It's good we are witnessing this live, and those are some of the maybe this have to do with memorialization. You know, the souls of our departed ones say, "No, you didn't treat me right." In my village, even the mortar pencil, the mortar you use, you leave them outside. They can gossip for you until they kill you, right? Because these things, in our belief, they have spirits. They have souls, so they talk. So the ancestors, maybe they are not happy with us that we have not been able to remember them. And like me, for instance, when I saw this, my father was killed by LPC rebels in the village between Dodweka and Dripple, right? The only time they remember that he was the one, because in the town, people went even by their clothes. How is my father memorialized? Because I've not been able to go there since '93 when he was killed. But Aaron, we're sorry. Maybe our ancestors are not happy how they've been remembered since they were brutally murdered, and that's why the internet is not working for you.
Apparently.
But go ahead, completely. We are liking this. Go ahead, sir. Aaron, you are responding to Morris's question, so you can complete your thoughts. We may be having the same issue.
Yeah, he's frozen.
No, he's not.
Is the internet on?
We can hear you, Aaron.
Aaron, we can hear you. You asking questions. We can hear you.
Internet is misbehaving all the time.
He can't hear. He can hear us.
Yeah. Oh, your mind. Bring that phone. She got data on it. Aaron's not here. She have enough there.
Yeah, Aaron, we're hearing you. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to hear him say whether we can heal as a country of our memorialization.
Right. And maybe some of us have a thought here.
But just if I may, just on that last comment, there's absolutely no way a country can heal without first recognizing what has happened. And by recognition, I mean whatever form of recognition. Tacit expression of remorse is a form of recognizing that a wrong has happened, especially coming from the government of the day, the authorities of the day, authorities of the state, to say this is what has happened. That's an effort in on the path to reconciliation. As we go ahead, Jimmy.
To add to you, one of the things you need is a shared narrative. For instance, the way we saw the other day people memorializing President Doe. Well, President Doe was a butcher to another whole group. So we need to have a shared narrative. Everybody come and agrees it. This is the truth about what went on. But every day, Dennis goes so we hear truth. Nangwe goes so we hear truth. everybody got a different story. Instead of we coming together and putting a shared narrative together so that we all can be reconciled.
But can that be that shared? Can that be that shared truth? Nobody
Yes,
can
there
hold
can be.
it.
There can be, Dennis. There can be. It has to be nationally driven. It has to be. It has to be deliberate. It has to be nationally driven. You take Rwanda, for instance, with everything that's happening in that country. Paul Kagame, once he's off the scene, you ask yourself the question: what will Rwandans say about him? You know, what kind of man was he? When you've seen the transformation his leadership has been able to attain in Rwanda, I am more than sure that his legacy is going to be positive. It's going to be positive. And so it's a function of leadership and the quality and deliberateness that's put into the process to ensure that that happens.
Thank you. Aaron, can you hear us now? Aaron, can you hear us?
I can hear you. I just switched to another internet. Hopefully it does the trick. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So let's go and hopefully the ancestors are happy that we are.
Hopefully.
So, please continue with that. And while you are away, we're talking about the truth being contested. It's people, and Clarence, even before he came in, he said, if you memorialize President Doe, for instance, you are glorifying perpetrators. And so a whole lot of things. But please, Morris is very interested in answer to his question. I don't want us to. I don't know, Morris.
Aaron, I don't want to drive you up. I'm just going to ask you one simple question. Can we heal without memorialization?
All right. That's a very interesting question. So I will come to that in a minute. Let me finish with the first question I was trying to respond to. So I was basically trying to give out a lay of the land, the complexity beyond the state. We often assume that the state is much more complex, and in grassroots community, things are. There is a lot of cohesion. There's decision making based on consensus, but it is far from that. It is much more complex, and the complexity is shaped by religion, it's shaped by identity, it's shaped by culture, and it's shaped by so many different factors that render the process of memorialization even more difficult. I will explain it to you how our Islamic brothers memorialize, how religion in fact prescribe the level of memorialization that is permissible in Islam. And then my research also took me into traditional African religion. Across Liberia, you may not have, especially beyond Monrovia, you may think when you go out and you don't see static monuments and you think that memorialization is not taking place. No, it is really taking place. But there are different forms of memorialization. Some of them are quite invisible. So at different sites of massacres, there's an ongoing practice across Liberia where there are a ritual sacrifice is committed before every farming season. Communities convene, elders there evoke the full practice of the Liberian culture where blood was spilled during the Civil War. They perform a particular ritual. Cows are killed.
Oh man, we'll get very interesting talk.
All right. We'll see how if Dr. Weah can be on the phone, instead of the internet. Let's work out those as let me use my Liberian word modalities. Let's work out those modalities so that Dr. Weah be on the phone instead. Yeah.
Well, then I think I can steal some time while you're working up those modalities.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we're not quiet. I think so far I've been monitoring the show from the beginning before coming on, and much of what I hear from Dr. Weah sounds good to me, except for a few things that I need to point out here. What is happening in Liberia when it comes to what we see going on with late President Doe, Torba, or Prince Weah Johnson, those are not memorialization. I mean, I stand to defer strongly. Our country is bent on rewarding perpetrators for the crime that they have committed against our people, and we continue to shy away from accountability. This is another form of impunity. If you use public money to give an elaborate state funeral for people who are alleged criminals of egregious crimes against our people, documented and indicted within our TRC report, that's not memorialization. That is like throwing insult into the face of the victims. Now, I agree with Dr. Weah when he says that memorialization is more of, say, trying to retain historical facts, get perpetrators some closure, especially in post-war situation, get victims rather closure, and to have some form of reconciliation. But this is not what this is achieving.
Dr. Pearson, Pearson, I got Dr. Weah on the call on the phone. Dr. Weah said something, so because Dr. Pearson is disagreeing with everything you said, and he's coming out.
No, not everything.
Okay, not everything. Okay, so go ahead, Dr. Pearson.
Yeah. So look, let me look. When I wrote my master's dissertation at the University of Liberia in the Kofi Annan program, I had the opportunity to do my research in a comparative analysis of TRC in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Then it's when I sat with Bishop Ompa, the chair of the Sierra Leone TRC, and I asked him similar question that the research of Dr. Weah is trying to answer. One of my questions to him was, how do we best memorialize our people? Before going to that, the first question I asked him was about how do we address the issue of accountability? And Bishop Ompa was very clear to me. He said, listen, young man, I was very young in face at that time. Just imagine, I'm talking about like 10 years plus back. He said, young man, he said, first of all, your TRC is going to have a short-lived success on the fact that you have.
I appreciate that, but if you can go directly to what you said so that Dr. Weah can respond quickly.
Yeah, here's my point. Since Dr. Weah is on the line, look, this is not memorialization when it comes to the issue of Prince Johnson, Samuel Doe, and those who have committed serious crimes in our country. This is not memorialization, because the purpose of memorialization is to retain history, to give victims an opportunity for closure, and to reconcile. And what I said while he was off the lines, why I agree with him on most of what he said about what memorialization is, I disagree on this fact because our society is more prone to rewarding our perpetrators than serving any reconciliatory process. And so that's what I meant when I said these guys, as we see them now, are not being memorialized. They are being glorified. And these are the major perpetrators within our civil crisis. So no, I disagree strongly.
Right, so let me ask you, you didn't mention President Tobo, you mentioned Doe and Kwangba. Will you also think that President Tobo has been glorified and he's a perpetrator or something? I want you to speak to that.
So first of all, if you look at communist country and communist rule or colonial rules or even South Africa apartheid, every monument of individuals that were put up in glorification of those individuals, even here in the United States, they were thrown down. They were rooted down. And even in Libya, Gaddafi image was rooted down. The purpose of memorialization does not serve to glorify individuals. Memorialization serves to serve a general public. That's why I went to mention when I said I spoke to Bishop Ompa. The old man said to me, he said, my son, your Liberia case is very unique. The best I can do for you when it comes to memorialization is to go to Freetown, middle of Freetown, and look at the memorialization park we got there. He said, we did not honor an individual. We allowed the memorialization park to tell the stories of our crisis. And not just that, and how the crisis was resolved. And how people who perpetrated grave crimes were dealt with. So when you walk into that, it tells a story. This situation right now, we want to glorify individuals. It's not memorialization.
Dennis.
I want Dr. Weah to come in now.
Okay. All right. So Dennis, I
I've heard Brother Pearson. I know his point is well articulated. What I would begin first by saying we should be cautious of how we draw comparison between Sierra Leone and Liberia. The nature of the conflict appeared to be similar, but how the conflict started and evolved and rolled out was very different. The Liberian conflict was led by the Liberian elites. The conflict in Sierra Leone was led by those from the lower rung of society. And that's why after the Lomé Agreement, it was quickly to come up with a transitional justice mechanism and prosecute those who were most culpable. In the case of Liberia, we are still struggling to deal with that. Why? Because those who organized the Liberian conflict were almost the same people who, after the Accra Agreement, retained power and was able to shape and make decisions and have been able to delay with the process of reconciliation and issue of transitional justice. So we have to be cautious how we compare the two different countries. We may look similar, but there's a lot of area of nuance that makes us very different. So to proceed to the next point is that memorialization, as I said from the beginning, is a very political process. And it's been led by individuals. You go to Nima today, Prince Johnson's statues are sprouting all over. Prince Johnson led an effective propaganda about war memory in after the war. He was the longest running senator after the Liberian Civil War. Why? Because he was able to feed the society with distorted memory of what the war was about. He succeeded because majority of Liberians alive today, in Nima especially, are the millennials, and they were born right before the Civil War. So he was able to tell people what they wanted to hear and not what the truth is. So memorialization has political objectives. It depends on who's using it and toward what particular end. So the question of whether memorialization can lead to reconciliation, there's no conclusive study on that. In countries where, in fact, there's a lot of remembering, issues of reconciliation can be difficult, but people can still live together. People can still learn to coexist so long they are aware of the truth. One of the advantages of memorialization, the truth about the past comes up very clearly. And sometimes some people are all they want. They want to know what happened yesterday. And they can decide that, all right, I know enough to know that this man is not my friend. I will not harm him, but I can never sit on the same table with him to eat. That is a powerful form of acknowledgement. And the people where I even study in Belfast, society is divided, but people get along. To the extent where they have to collaborate to get certain things done, but that's the limit of it. So memorialization doesn't necessarily lead to reconciliation. Memorialization is about justice, it's about acknowledgement, it's about truth-telling. All these two things do not necessarily produce an outcome of reconciliation.
But it can produce vengeance. Is that also true?
It's possible.
Memorialization, depending, especially if the memorial is developed to provoke the other side. In fact, there is a particular memorial in Bosnia and in Herzegovina where there was a soldier. Almost like we had the unknown soldier. But the soldier was very nationalistic, and his sense of nationalism was directed at a particular side. And that particular memorial always incited violence and always led to some form of violence and retribution. But let's not go too far to Eastern Europe. In Sinjé, where they had the Sinjé massacre, there was a memorial led by the Independent Human Rights Commission. And if you go to Sinjé, I wish I was on, I could show you the picture I took of the Sinjé Memorial. It was funded by UNDP and it was led by the Independent Human Rights Commission of Liberia. And Sinjé is predominantly a Muslim community. And the commission went in there and they erected a structure. It's not really clear what the structure is, but at the top of the structure, there is a human hand and there is a book that resembles whether the Holy Bible or the Quran. Since it's a predominantly Muslim community, I would say it's a Quran. So I took the picture and I met with the community. The youth of the community are very angry that they were not consulted. The elders said there were little consultation. They don't even know the meaning and the purpose of the memorial. This is a predominantly Muslim community. The outcome of the memorial should have been consultative so that people know exactly what it's for and it has some meaning in their lives. I went from there with a picture and showed it to the chief imam of Liberia. the chief imam Ali Krai, and he told me, he said, Aaron, these sort of memorials, they are good initiative, but it has to have purpose. It has to have meaning in the lives of people. You go in a low capacity community and you come up with a structure that they are not a part of. And say, if you have put a hand pump in a community, if you have put a clinic with a name on it in memory of victims of the St. James massacre, it will have a lot more purpose and meaning to the everyday lives of people in there than a static monument with a hand that look like someone is holding a Quran. So it has incited, the youth in the community are outraged. If you see the memorial in St. J, it's covered in a barbed wire fence. How do you build a memorial and fence it with a barbed wire? Because there is a problem from the community. The youths are angry. They're threatening to tear it down, like you heard Roy Mafor. So the anger and hurt and outrage can come from different directions. It doesn't have to be ethnic. It can be as a result of provocation by the particular memorial lacking purpose or not being consultative enough.
Thank you. George, I think you have not spoken. Oh, you have a question for Dr. Weah?
No, I haven't. I do, but I first wanted to speak to Dr. Pearson's point about some of our national individuals who have passed on and the whole process of giving them a befitting burial being seen as synonymous to memorialization. I think we're in conflict with what those two scenarios represent. Memorialization comes with whether it's community or sectarian effort or national effort to project an image of one individual or a collection of individuals for their services and to the state, to the community that they've made. Now, Prince Johnson's funeral, yes, was a national funeral because he was a sitting senator. We cannot, it puzzles me in terms of what kind of funeral did we expect? That he would bury himself? People had to bury Prince Johnson. People had to bury Samuel Doe. Now, Samuel Doe and William R. Talbot were national individuals. They were presidents. Now, for every leadership, there have been times during their leadership where there have been negatives. And if we held those negatives behind them, national healing, and I said national healing, not sectarian healing, national healing, it becomes almost impossible if we're not bringing the forces that supported those people together. It's like saying, how can we have political reconciliation without bringing in the CDC? It's almost impossible. Regardless of what their 6 years look like, it's almost impossible that we can have political reconciliation without sitting on the same table with the CDC. So here is the point when it comes to national healing. Individuals who represented a significant number of the population, significant segments of the population, have to be brought to bear. I'm one of those who believe that I think the government, in all honesty, have lost an opportunity for national healing. Because what is national healing? If we can bring the forces, the divided forces together around the hurt and around the successes. What is national healing if we can bring those hurts together in the same place? And so we've traded sectarian interest over national healing. As far as those two processes, there's an opportunity we might not get again to see that the Talbot family will bury Talbot separately and the Doe family will bury Doe separately. We might not get that process.
But Josh, who's going to bury my father too now?
No, but again, it's not just your father. Many others, all of us.
I'm just giving an example.
What we're saying, your father was known in Sinai, may not have been known in Monrovia. And so it is on the government and its effort to reconcile the sectarian component. So healing has a national segment to it and a sectarian, what we call community segment. So what is going on in Grand Judah right now is a misstep Because in all fairness, Samuel Doe, even though he could have gone to Grand Judah eventually, but the division in our country, spanned from 1980. 1980, you can go back to Tadma, to Talbot, to Doe. Those three leaders represent the division. Because between and amongst the Congo people, you had the Talbot and the Tadma, the old guards. And that was a problem in and of itself. And then Samuel Doe comes in. But Aaron, so I want you to speak to the missed opportunity between being able to distinguish between national opportunity and sectarian opportunity. But also, fundamentally, there can be no healing without the truth. And one of the areas in which we failed to establish the truth, someone talked about a common narrative. It's what happened in 1980. We are yet to have a clear national narrative, a common narrative on what happened. There are varying interpretations of what happened in 1980.
Dr. George, there's a narrative being pushed here right now, like Dr. Weah said, because we allow the perpetrators to present the narratives. They are creating the narratives. Our young people don't understand the gravity of their crimes. Our young people don't understand the gravity of their crimes. They are being glorified. Public money is being used to glorify them, build them monuments, build them luxurious graves, parading them in the peace-eating luxurious casket. And you telling me somebody will create a narrative?
Who was the victim in 1980? You tell me. Who was the victim?
Listen. I'm telling you the narratives as we have it is not going to serve us well because we are giving our young people the wrong narratives. That's
so we're here.
They can hurt the country and get rewarded. This is the
Dennis,
wrong
can I say something, Dennis? It seems. I mean, Clarence, your narrative can be the absolute narrative, though, right? So I think Aaron said it from the beginning that in memorialization, it's okay to have two different narratives as long as we recognize it and know that these diversity also contribute to nation building. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just that we have to be able to understand that your narrative could be yours, Clarence, and George's narrative could be George's narrative, and they're okay to exist side by side. There's nothing wrong with that.
If I'm just 5 seconds.
Dr. William, let you complete your thought. So Aaron will answer, and then you come in, Victor.
So in short, we're still struggling with what the truth is for a lot of these significant situations around which we must reconcile. So there's one, the issue of fundamental truths, and the second is about the missed opportunity between national opportunity for memorialization and those of the sectarian. How do we reconcile that challenge?
Sectarian is hard. Say community.
Well, same thing. Even in the community, there's sectarian.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Weah.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. I think this is a very interesting part of the conversation. I agree with Josh that there is a sectarian dimension of memorialization taking place in Liberia. If you look at the politics of ethno-nationalism in Nimba and how the politics of consensus building, and that consensus is not grounded in civic, in the notion of the new civic understanding of the society. The consensus politics that we see in Nimba has its roots in the political violence of the 80s and the Civil War. And that's a form of social memory making that Prince Johnson used in building his own political career. So is a sectarian form of memorialization taking place? Yes, there is it. And then you have the pre-1980 and how, in my assessment, and what I'm about to say, I know it's sensitive, but I've studied the TRC report well enough to have an opinion on some things. So if you read the TRC report, there is a certain unevenness with how the narratives of the 80s and that of the Civil War years are produced. So the TRC is very light on the truths and the acknowledgement of the 80s. For example, if you go to April 1980, and and April 22nd, how the TRC package and presents the atrocities against the officials of government, you will see that it makes a sweeping reference to that. And Truth Commission has to be deliberate in how you visit watershed moments of society. April 1979, April 1980 has to be addressed in equal measure. The TRC almost tried to escape the responsibility of confronting the truth. And in my view, the truth, regardless of perceptions about people being corrupt, I mean, no one should be executed in the manner and form we saw with April 22nd, 1980. The TRC report fell short of saying that. And in terms of truth telling, that is a problem in the direction of reconciliation. So the TRC report is very heavy on the Civil War years, which is 1990 and thereafter, and then on the beginning of the 80s, the level of atrocity committed by the People Redemption Council, the TRC, is almost silent on that. You'll find references to the execution of the 13 in different parts of the report and not in the place that it ought to be. So I'm trying to say this point that when the national process fails in its mission to acknowledge the truth that people are looking forward to, it helps to prolong reconciliation. It helps to derail the national process. And I think the TRC, whether by design or by default, has contributed to that. And so it undermines the collective process of reburial that the recommendation was meant to achieve, where Doe, Talbot, and other statesmen, in a way, should be buried in the same place where when people go there, can be able to say, oh yeah, these are our leaders. They never really agree, but in a way, in death, they are bringing a society together. They are setting in motion a form of reflection, a form of learning, and a form of healing. In a way that didn't happen. And I think the TRC report, in terms of its shortcoming, it failed to address some hard truths in the manner and form that was expected of it, and it has contributed to some form of delayed reconciliation on that.
But specifically, I want you to address Dr. Pearson's point of glorifying perpetrators. And I like in one of your interviews that I did, you try to distinguish because victims became perpetrators. So it's like it's not binary. There is no clear, oh, this person is a victim, this person is a perpetrator. One person can be both.
Yeah. And the thing about Pearson's point is that we have to first see what is the role. Is the ethnic communities and family has the right to remember their loved ones in any way they choose to, so long it doesn't violate the laws. So you can have your family trying to remember you. If you were a perpetrator, if you were a criminal, they can choose to remember you in the best way possible. It may offend some uncertain sensibility, but that is the right of the family. If the state, one of the problems I've had, and I should share with you all here, is I have been trying to read the Gazette in the Liberian public sector. When a statesperson died, there is a Gazette rating. And so I wanted to see the Gazette of perpetrator who died. And you should see the worst rating in this Gazette. They are completely in tension with the TRC final report. Prince Johnson, for example, is declared one of the most notorious perpetrators. But then you read the Gazette coming out of the Foreign Affairs that acknowledge him, as a statesman. The Gazette is rating about Prince Johnson as a senator. And then you turn to Elijah Kroma, and there is a Gazette rating by Elijah Kroma. But then when you go to the TRC final report, you see that they acknowledge that Elijah Kroma, the atrocities he committed, the Ulimo K and Ulimo J, the combined atrocities committed amount to, I think, 17 or 18%. And so you see, what you see coming out of this is a society struggling to strike the balance between who this person was and what has been his contribution as a statesman. So the Gazette coming out of the Foreign Affairs after the war is in direct tension with the Truth and Reconciliation report findings that declare these people as villains, as perpetrators in some of the highest order. So I agree with you. The term glorification, I would not want to use that in terms of the state. Is the state doing that? or who is doing the glorification. So let's give Brother Pearson some time to see who is doing the glorification. Is it the state that is doing that? Let him share with us specific examples of what is that glorification coming from, and so we can talk about. So far, I don't see it. I see ethnic communities are trying to give their kinsmen last respect, like Prince Johnson. There is a flourishing of memorialization in Nimba County since the death of Prince Johnson in November last year.
So what role do memorials play in the broader transitional justice process?
Dennis, you want me to just give a 30 seconds feedback on the we are constrained to me?
No. Yeah.
Wait a minute. I've been waiting. Am I going?
Yeah. Oh, hold on. Okay, let Victor go.
Yeah.
My question. Let Victor go now.
I'll be brief, and Dr. Pearson. I think what we are discussing here today is a little bit ahead of what is happening in Liberia. I don't think what is happening in Liberia can be described as memorialization. I think we're mischaracterizing what is happening. What is happening is a reburial. I think memorialization will arrive at that after a very extensive national conversation that I think will cut across all strata of Liberian society. So I think if we sit here today and we're talking about memorialization, I think we're a little bit ahead. I don't think what is happening in Liberia today can be described as trying to memorialize anybody. I think Samuel Doe and William Talbot, presidents that served the Republic of Liberia, were buried in unmarked graves. I think it is befitting to exhume and rebury them. I think that's something we can give them. I don't think that's too much to ask. I don't think it is. I don't think they are being memorialized. As to when they will be memorialized, I think we'll arrive at that after a very, very deep national conversation. Okay. I just want to throw that on the table.
Aaron, I want you to respond to that because I know that is not accurate. Go ahead.
Wait, what is not accurate? What I just said is not accurate?
You may have...
No, Aaron, wait, Aaron, hold a second. What part of what I just said is not accurate?
That the reburial, that is non-memorialization, is reburial.
Yeah.
I disagree. Go ahead.
Let Weah there. He's the expert. Let him go.
So let me give you another form of memorialization that we wouldn't see. We're too westernized in our conception of what memorialization is. And so sometimes when it doesn't meet the standard that comes out in textbook that we are used to, we think it is not memorialization. So my research in communities and towns, in certain communities, in rural Liberia, most of those who have died, the names of relatives have been passed on to second, third generation. So if my name is Aaron in a village, if I was famous in a village and I passed during the war, I was killed or something, my name is given to younger kids of my family. I've discovered that it's so so widespread across Liberia.
Yeah.
And then the issue of dreams that's happening based on people who died. There's a memorial in Bone County called Sameh. There is a guy who was killed in the October 27, 1994 stampede, the fall of Banga, and the RPC fighters that were running away and shot up a village and killed. One of the guys who was killed in the massacre was considered a lover of football, and he brought the community together. And because of his mobilization, the community became a major in that particular part of the Kokoya district. They never lost a football match. This guy appeared 5 years after the massacre, started to appear in the dreams of the communities. And he told, according to the townspeople when I interviewed them, and they felt it was strange. And there was occurrences of the dream, and the community convened a meeting to understand what the meaning of this, what was the meaning of this guy appearing in this dream. And it became quite recurrent. And the interpretation was that we have to do something. The people who die, they are not happy. And one of the interpretation was that if we don't remember these people in any meaningful way, we will win no further soccer match. And true to their words, they kept having losses. A local passion of the community was football, and they kept being defeated until they were able to erect a memorial and remember the 37 persons that died. So memorialization is happening across Liberia in different forms. I also told you about the ritual sacrifices that's taking place. People are killing and chickens, spilling the blood, calling the high priest, or you call the country devil, member of the poor and the son, come and say commemorative wordings, and they pray on it. That is memorialization. But if we look towards the West for instruction and memorialization, then we will miss out on what our local context say about memorialization. It's not like you will have the Vietnam Memorial, like you have in Washington. You will have the other memorial that you have elsewhere in the U.S. There are memorialization that is uniquely African, and we have to recognize that it is equally a form of memorialization taking place. So reburial is in fact a classic form of memorialization. Why should a state go through the entire process of reburying former heads of states who have been dead and buried and held up in a mass grave? The other one remains were cremated and scattered over the St. Paul River.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I totally disagree with that.
Yeah,
Aaron, I'm disagreeing with you. If the former president is buried in a mass grave, I think digging him up and reburying him. I'm not sure if really. I disagree.
Okay, Aaron, let me break it down. Since Victor, memorialization means to memory, to remember. So if the person is in a mass grave, you can't remember. So right now you bury the person alone. The children, the great grandchildren, the generation next will look at that, right? Like, oh, this is where my father was buried, or this is where my great grandfather was buried. That's memorialization. My son Kunro was named after my cousin who died in the war. So to remember him, I gave the name to my son. That's memorialization.
Are you done?
So we have to. I mean, this is an important conversation because we overlook certain things from our own culture, and we only get used to what is written up in Western standards as the defining type of what we think memorialization is. But that's misleading. That is misleading. We have to look back at our own society and see that, all right. And in fact, this is some of the reason why in 2019 the African Union Transitional Justice Framework was established. Long before there has been a lot of critique about transitional justice, that it followed too closely the Western conception of how society deal with its past. The panel of the wise in the African Union came together and said, we need to redefine, reframe, and expand the discourse in Africa so that it reflects the lived reality of the African culture and the African continent. And so we now have the Transitional Justice Framework. And in there, it deals extensively with memorialization, issue of dreams, issue of how society engage in the invisible state, engage with culture, is being acknowledged as an important element of culture that is close to our form, our unique form of how we remember yesterday to inform today. So we have to be mindful of how what we dismiss as not memorialization because it doesn't fit the kind of design we used to, especially for some of us who went to Western University. We have to be very self-conscious about us being African and what is uniquely African form of memorialization, naming our children and engaging in a state of dreams and how it informs our actions. They are uniquely a part of our cultural practices, and in most ways they inform our practices of memorialization.
Thank you.
So, can you get 30 seconds? I mean, what's going on? The answer to you, my man.
All right, go ahead. Go ahead, Dr. Pearson.
Look, Dr. Weah, there's a lot that you are saying that I agree with you 100%, you know. And those instances that you cite, I also agree with you. Those are forms of memorialization in our culture. But you know, look, you asked me a question. You say, how can I tie what is happening in terms of these burials and how it translates to a form of memorialization, in form of glorification, as I'm calling it? Listen, you mentioned the Gazette. That's one of the things that really annoyed me. I put that in our chat group today. You have gazettes that are telling the story of these individuals wrong, and you read the point that out. The gazettes is a complete contradiction to the history of these individuals. And let's move beyond that. Dr. Weah, let me say this to you. I'm not bothered about people burying their family members, even though I didn't get the chance to bury my father or my brother because of the civil crisis. I don't even know where they are buried. I would have loved to have a neutral form of a statue or monument that does not even represent any physical image or whatever the case is, but just something that will provide history that is genuine and a place that we can all go and acknowledge the wrong and see how we address the wrong. But listen, Dr. Weah, the funerals of these individuals that we're talking about was funded or has been funded by public dollars. I'm not saying, I'm not guessing about this. I'm saying funded by my own public dollars. By my own public dollars. And I think it's wrong. And what we tell our kids by doing these things is to give them the appearance that these perpetrators who have committed these heinous crimes in our government, in our country rather, are suited to be followed. They are suited to be emulated. And I think our government should distance themselves from these exercises and pursue what is a genuine form of memorial. That's what we're saying. But the history is distorted by their action.
Thank you.
Dennis, I think, again, if I may, please.
Yeah, I wanted Morris to come in now because he will soon leave us.
I should be leaving in the next. Yeah, I should be leaving in the next 10 minutes. Dr. Pearson,
after Morris.
Dr. Pearson, I hear the fire in you about this memorialization. The way that
it's political, so it will be like that.
Yeah, I can't define what is political is, part of his memory of some of the people in his family that were
the state action. The state action will be political. If they can win election, they will do it.
But truly speaking, I think Aaron have addressed some of the things that you are talking about. And he did point out some of the lapses that have caused us to be where we are today in terms of memorialization, reconciliation, accountability. I think Aaron has talked, extensively about some of that. That it is only within this current dispensation that we've seen some movement within addressing some of the things that happened with the Liberian Civil War. He did, speak about some of that. Maybe you came on late, you didn't hear it. But in terms of Dr. Weah, I'm not comfortable calling you Dr. Weah because we know each other for so long.
Just Aaron, you okay with it?
Yeah, but in terms of Aaron, in terms of memorialization, is there a particular time frame for people to memorialize for communities to memorialize victims from their communities or family members to memorialize? Is there a time frame? Are there any ways that memorialization can be translated into civic and education for future generation? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, I guess statute of limitation.
No, man.
Memorialization gets statute of limitation. He says there a time frame.
No, okay, great. I hear that. Can I go, Dennis?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I don't think there is no limitation to that. The only thing is we are working on the framework set up by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it's now 16 years since the report was released, or it's almost 16 years since the report was released. Some communities have gone on without waiting for the official strategy, if there is going to be one anytime soon. Communities are going ahead. I don't think there are any limitation to how community can organize and try to remember that. Use America, for example. See the slave museum. See the Juneteenth memorial that keep going on with the Tulsa massacre. I mean, that's how many years ago? That was in the 19th century, if I recall correctly. So there are no limitations. There are no limitations to that. In fact, the new generations coming up may ask new questions about yesterday. Why did this not happen? Why did this happen? The issue of why, the very sensitive point that the Pearson is making about why are we using state money to finance the lavish funeral of people who committed some of the most unspeakable crimes may be something that may be questioned. Some of the memorials coming up tomorrow. I'm not saying some people may even raise question about why does it need to be standing up. The issue of taking it down might not be lost on the next generation. So a lot of things may come about when the more stable Liberia becomes, the more intelligent the society becomes. We're still in the period of humanitarianism. We're still in the early developmental stage. There's so much compromises going on in the transitional justice decision making. 30 years away from this period, 40 years away, you may have a more stable environment where people get to think more clearly and be more ethical about what to remember, how to remember, and how there should be a clear separation from the people who brought harm to the society, and that they don't deserve to be remembered in the way that it's been encouraged so far through taxpayer money. Pearson's point there, is a very important point.
Thank you. And George, you can come on and answer, call us. But before that, Aaron, what I want you to do is this memorialization. I talked to you maybe 2-3 years ago about it. How can we mainstream it, and how do we make that part of our curriculum? I mean, the importance to connect memorialization with our high school curriculum, with public education, so that not just people like you and Pearson will be talking about it. But before that, so hold that thought, think about it. Mr. George, go ahead, please announce our numbers so we can get our callers from Liberia.
Okay, so folks, wherever you are, if you are listening to the program, Focus on Liberia on Care Radio 95.9. The numbers to call 0777 959 959 081 871 670 0777 959 959 and 0881 871 670. Once call coming, I will let you guys know.
Thank you. Dr. Weah.
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, my question on connecting memorialization with school curriculum and public education and all the other things we can do so that other people will be a part, because this is very important.
Yeah, it is. And thank you for this question. One important part of memorialization is how history books after conflict are written. Some history are written from the point of view of transformative history writing. Now, what is transformative history? Somewhere in the TRC report, it talks about government should outlaw some of the negative stereotypes about different ethnic groups. You see in the TRC report, it listed a long list of outlawing the process of referring to a Pele man as stupid, referring to the man from Maryland as a ritualist, referring to the man from Grand Crew as a troublemaker. And it says, the TRC says in graphic terms that peace was in heaven before the crewmen arrived. These are the words from the TRC. And the crime man eats fire coal. And so a transformative history writing after conflict is meant to address some of these cultural stereotypes, as derogative as some of them sound, but they are very, very sensitive, especially when you talk about the Bassa woman. I mean, I wouldn't say this on the show, but it says something very unpleasant about a Bassa woman in that. So transformative history after conflict is meant to address some of these stereotypes in a way that respect is restored and dignity is restored to identities, to cultural groups. And the second point is to engage into this sort of civic culture of writing history is first to go through the process of criminal accountability. You cannot write history now and talk about certain warring factions and list certain individuals without the risks of libel, without going to court. And most people don't value the relevance of the war and economic crimes code until you say this much, because the war and economic crimes code is going to unlock some of the legal hurdle of libel, because as long as you go to court, the court becomes the highest. Everything that goes through careful scrutiny, and all of the histories are written about every war faction. That's one of the advantages of the Sierra Leone Special Code. Everything about the RUF was written, the motivation, why, how they came about from Libya. So everyone was free to write about it. The same is going to happen for the MPFL, the IMPFL, LERD, Model, all of the warring factions. And you can see almost the same thing. The facts about the leaders of these warring factions will be written up. Now, why am I saying this? I'm saying this to say that for us to get into the business of writing civics books, all of these details have to be in place. And for these details have to be in place, they first have to be vetted through the court, and they have to be cleared through the court so that Liberians can be able to have a comprehensive and general history on the conflict. And with this comprehensive and general history, civic lessons now can be passed down in different forms, in different iterations. They can be developed, and schools can have them, museums can have them. I'm a big fan of counties having their own museums, and telling their own history. I think different counties were affected in unique ways throughout the Civil War. There should be a museum built in River G that is different from the museum built in Grand Gita, because the experiences in Grand Gita was a little different from River G, even though we all suffer from the same Civil War, but the experiences shifted from one county to the next. I think superintendents should have a clear transitional justice vision, should have a clear transitional justice agenda, where they get to develop museums, specific museums, to tell the story from the vantage point of each county, Lofa County, that has the highest diversity of ethnicity and culture, should have a museum that tells the story about how Lofa County, what explained the 36 sites of massacre that is in Lofa County, for example. Why 36 sites of massacre? What explained that level of aggression that Lofa suffered? The same way with River Cess, with Grand Cape Mount and the rest of it. So the civic books will not be complete until we have the clear, we have the leeway to talk about everything about the Civil War. And that's what I think the court process will help to unlock all of that and give us the leverage to write about the general history of Liberia, about the Civil War, and before we get to write about the civics.
Thank you.
Isn't it too late? Don't you
If
think
you are listening, you heard the responsibility placed on the shoulder of superintendents. I don't know if that started to making you to think about me. Go ahead,
Yes.
Jimmy. You were saying something.
Yeah, Dr. Weah, don't you think with all this time that has elapsed, people are dying and all? Don't you think we some of the knowledge and some of the clarity that we're looking for is already lost?
I think we have, with the passage of time, we've lost a lot. There's a great deal of missed opportunity that have gone by, but you still have a 26% that was there before 1990. People who were 10 years old, people who were 15 years old constitute, according to the new census, about 26%. And that 26% is in both in Liberia and in the diaspora.
Wow.
It's a small number, but it's significant. It's significant to get something done. So I don't think it's too late. I don't think it's too late. I think that I was reading somewhere the other day, the survivor from the Holocaust from the Nazi concentration camp. I think the number now has shrunk to, I think, 20 or less than 20. And those people are still, some of them in their 90s, some in their 100s, are still finding a way to explain their experiences as old as they are. And we have 26% of the population. They're still there to be a part of a process to write about the most destructive period in Liberian history, as I describe it. 26%, I think it's small, but it's a significant number to try to get civic materials and historical materials here before we all turn 70 and 80 and no longer have the energy to do that.
All right, gentlemen, we're about to close in 11 minutes. But Aaron, let me ask you my final question, because there's this thing that and you mentioned earlier about the elite being remembered, and I keep telling you about my father, for instance. So, if you have one message for Liberians, especially those who feel forgotten, what would you say about the importance of memory, healing, and the collective shaping of the nation's legacy? Oh, Dr. Weah the phone is reconnecting. It looks like we are having problem all over. But while we wait for Dr. Weah, Dr. Weah, you there?
I want to speak to Mr. Pearson Point while we're waiting.
No, I want Victor come in and then George. We have 10 minutes to close. So Aaron, we disconnected, is still reconnecting. So, but I know you have something to say, almost like closing, and then George, make me some points here.
Yeah, that's me, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity. I really enjoyed the discussion. I disagree with the characterization of what is happening in Liberia, but each to his own. I think what is happening is a rebel, and I am a little person. I understand your concern for your dad. All of us lost relatives here. But as much as we did lose relatives, I don't think we're all on the same scale. A president is a president. That's why he is a president. I am not equal to a president. So I don't expect the same treatment accorded a president to be accorded to me. I think that's just unfair. So I think these people, they rule Liberia for a period of time. I think if they're buried in a mass grave, I think it's a civilized thing to rebury them. I think that is not, to me, it's not equivalent to memorialization. But thank you for the show.
Victor, let me just mention that you don't have to rebury my father, right? But just mention it. Say other people.
I did at the opening of the show.
No, not you. No, I'm talking about the government on it. That's why George probably
I agree with you on that. I agree with you on that as well.
Another thing that is happening is just look at Center Street, look at Gully Street. Those are grave sites. Okay, how do we, if your loved one was buried there, how do you remember that person? They've been, I think they say one of those grave sites was closed up. You can't even get to it, and all that kind of stuff, right? They're being broken into over and over. It's a band of people live there, and the government seems not to care. Yeah. George, you're closing.
Well, thank you, Dennis. I think, like Tsunami said, it's a very healthy conversation. I think it's a conversation that has to continue. As an educator, one of the challenges we have in drawing up the kind of textbooks that should be in the classroom, especially with regards to social studies, is the conflict of not having a common or shared narrative in terms of what happened and, hopefully how we want to not see it happen again. So this conversation has to happen. As a supporter of the current president, I think there's been too many missteps in addressing some of these very critical issues as far as national healing and reconciliation is concerned. It's major. I think a lot can be done. Upside of the cosmetics, a lot can be done. And some of them are really practical. You just talked about Center Street. I'm one of those who believe that Center Street should not become a memorial park. That whole place should be torn down. It's all part of urban renewal. It's all part of giving dignity to those who, ancestors of the country. A lot of people are buried down there, but there has to be deliberate efforts to make these things happen. And I think the government isn't being deliberate in a lot of these. To have our two most significant individuals in the last 30 years be buried separately in programs that are almost unnoticed is disheartening. This was an opportunity. Personally, I felt the three presidents, Tubman, Tauber, and Dole, should have been brought together as one in the same vicinity, brought together and be buried as a way of bringing Liberians together, because they represent three critical periods in the nation's history. We've thrown all of that away by utilizing the sectarian approach rather than the national approach for those individuals. Again, thanks for the conversation. We look forward to more of this. As an educator, we're hoping that this conversation can now, be taken up into the classrooms, but to do so will require a lot of other things, foundational issues. Yeah. So thank you so much.
George, before you go, you said, like, for instance, if I'm president, if you said, for instance, the late President Doe should have been buried in Monrovia instead of Grand Jiren against the
I
wishes.
would have, if I were president, I would have buried him in Monrovia.
What if he wanted? What if he wanted to be buried in Grand Jiren?
Well, we could have done two things. A symbolic representation would have been done in Monrovia so that his actual body goes to Grand Jiren. You can do that also. You know, you can do that also. But you want a situation where those three critical individuals are brought together. You saw the symbolism when Ellen Johnson, George Weah, and President Barker held hands during the inauguration. Do you know what that meant for the country?
I have a different opinion on that. I just meant that's the biggest division, because if these elites are the one who anyway, I want to leave it at that.
There will always be elites in our society.
There's nothing called a classless society, Dennis.
Yeah, but if we only remember the elite, if we only use it, borrowing from Dr. Pearson, glorify, because that's the same thing we see in our daily lives, where we celebrate these people, we celebrate leaders, especially those who got the country nowhere. And these are the only people we celebrate. I thought we were going to also mention other people that were murdered as a result of their stand, of their advocacy, right? But no, we don't pay attention to them. It's only political leaders.
But Dennis, are we saying the likes of Dennis Jah can be, if you memorialize him in Monrovia, who knows him? He could be there. You could put his name on one big placard. Who knows him? Put it on EJ Road. Nobody knows. Take it to Sino County. People know Dennis Jah from, I've forgotten the village you come from. But people will remember you. It's more meaningful.
What I mean is we only celebrate presidents. What's about the people that were, do you know where D12 was buried? For instance.
12 Farm.
Okay, let me bring in Dr. Weah again. We are having problems. So I want Dr. Weah, I want you to conclude. We are to get your conclusion. And the last part here is Aaron, if people were fighting for liberation, or if people were going against leaders, but if we only remember the leaders and don't remember the people that, I don't know which name I can put forward now, sometimes it becomes more and more contested. But I want you to conclude on the message, especially those of us who feel that anytime you only celebrate and using Pearson word, glorify people that are seen as perpetrators, or you don't even mention the people that are, all the way down there because they are not leaders. The same thing we see in our politics. We celebrate only political leaders. If you are not in government, nobody knows you and nobody cares. So even people that have made significant contribution to our country are not memorialized unless they hold state power. I was also talking about the Central Street graveyard, the Gully Street, the way it's being kind of destroyed and nobody pays attention to it. We are also destroying memory. But please conclude.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to say thanks, John Dennis, and before I forget, I want to say you should, as a form of memorialization, store the recording from these sessions and formally turn them over to the museum. You'll be surprised 10, 15 years from today if some of these tapes are played and some of the insights that we share here will be so meaningful to a society still in search of how to engage with this. So we may overlook that this conversation contribute effectively to ongoing discussions on memorialization. And one of our first work would be to preserve them, record them, and over time you can turn especially episodes that deal with memorialization over to the museum or over to different centers that are looking at this. But otherwise, memorialization are deeply political processes. They are often a reflection of the politics of the society. And because they are a reflection of the politics of society, there will always be tension, there will always be conflict. We will have problem with the decisions of the state to engage with some certain players in a certain way, in the same way that we have conflict at the grassroots level, the way memorialization is being done at the grassroots level. I forgot to mention this. Somewhere in River says there was a conflict because about 500 persons, according to the TRC, was killed in a community, and the community could only account for 20% of those killed because only 20% of the 500 persons came from that village. And so up to now, there is still a tension with how do we, because the community wanted to have a rule of honor, the full listing of all those who was killed. And all the members of the community said, well, we can't do that because we don't have a full and complete list of everyone. Some of the people here were strangers. They were fleeing from Monrovia. They were killed here. So how do you address this? Once one side is saying we should remember, let's develop a full list, but it is impossible to develop a full list when you don't know who all were killed here and buried here. And so that has become, in fact, an important reference in the composition of memorialization, in Liberia. But otherwise, I want to say it is very complicated. It is political, and the decisions that we see are being made. Some of the decisions are politically friendly. People are still making decisions based on a constituency, based on what is perceived to be politically correct. People are trying to do that. So I hear Pearson. I think Pearson's point, he's come from the point of the ethics of memorialization. What should not be done and what should be done. I mean, that is more of an ideal state, but there is nothing ideal about the politics in Liberia. There's nothing ideal about the transitional justice in Liberia. So Peterson is coming more from the side of ethics and the side of justice towards who deserves to be memorialized and who don't deserve to be memorialized. But I want to say thank you, Dennis. This is a very good exchange. I learned a lot. Some of the questions are very thoughtful, and the exchanges have been very helpful for me. Thank you all.
Yeah, let's do it again. Meanwhile, we are inviting you back here, ladies and gentlemen. Join us at 7 p.m. Eastern. There have been arrests and incarceration in Monrovia, Liberia, due to corruption. And then before that, we had suspensions of some officials from the Bureau of State Enterprises, the MCSS, for corruption. We want to discuss that. Join us at 7 p.m. Dr. Pearson and George finished talking. Dr. Pearson, your conclusion.
Thank you, Dennis. I think it was a great show, as always, and thanks to my fellow panelists. Listen, I agree with Dr. We are on so many things. It's just that I frown on the fact that we've had a situation where we've given more incentives to those who've committed crimes in our country and continue to do so, sending the wrong message. And by that, we are rewriting the history of our country in the wrong direction. Like he brought up in a share in our chat group, the gazettes that have been written for these individuals, public funding being spent on them, the elaborate funerals and graves and monuments that are being erected in their names are all validating what they've done to our people, and they're sending the wrong message to our people. And these are some of the things we want to put our foot down and say, listen, this is a conversation we must have. And if our government should take any step in the direction of giving people any form of validation of their service to the country, it should be in reference to how they've been evaluated in our history, not just because of political leaning, like Dr. Weah said. And so these are things we're very passionate about. And I want to close on saying that, listen, when memorialization is done in a proper way, it does facilitate the reconciliation and healing in the country. And I look forward to it being done properly.
Thank you. And, before you put your foot on, at least you must get shoes on. People are barefooted, so maybe that's why their foot can get to the ground. Jimmy?
Yeah, I think this was a brilliant show, Dennis. Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Weah. But it also shows something. You see, Dr. Weah was talking about how we can surgically heal the country. He talked about having museums in each county, and this is how it has to be done. And it shows clearly that when you have an expert doing something, it's much different than somebody who is incompetent for that job. Our problem is we have Liberians that are very competent, but what has been problem has been the ones that are not competent are the ones that are in control. It's not that we don't have people that can move the needle and bring about reconciliation and development in the country. But they are displaced, and we are at the mercy of those who don't know how to do it but want to be in power. And last thing I would just say before I go, Dr. Pearson was making a point that we're not honest. We could have memorialized Prince Johnson if you want. Say yes, he was a senator. He was very pivotal in the removal of the Dole regime. But at the same time, after subsequent investigation, we found out that he was involved with a whole lot of murders. You know, I mean, why can't we be honest about it? You know, just tell one side of the story instead of telling both sides. You can tell the truth about somebody without bias, you know, and that is what we do. And we have to be honest with ourselves if we're going to move ahead. I'll leave you right there.
Thank you. Dr. Weah, you have 30 seconds to say something, and then we close.
I would say, Dennis, this is really thoughtful, and I think this panel and this show is a great service to a society in search of healing, to a society in search of solution, very practical solution. And everyone on this show, from Morris to William to Jimmy and the PSC and the other colleague there, I mean, asked very thoughtful questions. And we overlook how much people may be tuning into this. It would be good to see if you have been able to track down the listenership of this program and how people may be tuning into this. And we're not having much of this conversation in Monrovia. The radio stations in Monrovia are very political. Everything is just carried away by legislative politics and all the form. But this one is very educated. You bring together all these senior and very intelligent colleagues that are offering very practical.
Okay.
Thank you. Victor, please close on behalf of Focus on Liberia.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Thank you all very much. Thanks to Dr. Weah, very brilliant presentation. Thanks also Dr. Pearson, Mr. Eastman, Dr. Williams, and of course the incoming superintendent of Sino County, Mr. Dennis John. Thanks to the audience. Deconti has been pretty busy in the chat. I think she has a date with Dr. Pearson now. And then they're going to. But thanks very much to the audience. Thanks for keeping us, interactive. And it's been a great show. It's been an honor as well. Hopefully we'll be back here again next Thursday.
On that note, we end with our song that says, whether you believe this will glorify or memorialize, we are all Liberians. Have a good night. And God, see you at 7.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our